Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to part 3 of the Label and Name Card Creator. We can now add templates, save templates, and update templates, and we also have added the feature of adding specific text boxes and text fields to any label, so we can now color that accordingly. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. We've got a lot to cover in the third and final part of the Label and Name Card Creator. I've done so much work with this, so there's a lot more I want to show you. And so see, we can now review and print. So even if it's something like ID cards, we can do that as well. So I wanted to show you how we did that. So now we can save a template, so we can have many different types of labels, many different ID cards. Simply put in a name here and click update the template, and it's going to be updated. And I want to show you exactly how we did that. So let's go into the design phase and start with that. But before I get to that, I want to make sure we bring you these videos each and every Tuesday. Brand new ones with products you can use and show you new and amazing ways to use Excel you may not have thought of. If you want to get those, just make sure you subscribe to our channel and go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and we'll be sure to give you notifications each and every week so that you don't miss a video. Also, if you love creating these applications, you want to do it full time and create amazing income potential with your applications, passive income, I'm going to show you just how to do that, just as I've been doing with my own applications for many years. I'm now teaching how to do that in our mentorship program. So if this is something that's interesting to you, have a look at our mentorship program. I'm going to take you through every single phase of the application, including the defining phases, the design and the development. Of course, we're going to teach you even how to deploy, including websites and licensing, securing your applications, and every part in between. It's going to be the full path. So I will be revealing the entire process in the course. So if you'd like to pick that up, go ahead and click the links below, and I'll make sure to include that. All right, thanks so much. So the first thing is, let's show you how we added a text box. And basically what the idea is, when a user adds a text box, I'm going to take a copy of some type of a text box. Here it's in black, we can't see it, but I'll drag it over here. I'm going to take a text box and give the user the power to create their own text box. So all we need to do in Excel is make sure Excel tracks the number of text boxes that we're using, and we know that this specific text box has to be included in the label. So we want to make sure that. So what we'll do in VBA is make sure we give it a specific title like text box or TXT box 5, and if I add another picture, it's going to be incremental, and so this one will be 6, just as we know. So we see text box 6. So we have to make sure it has a specific name and assign it. And all I need to do is really create a copy of, I can copy another one, or I can create a new one through VBA. So it's very simple. So that when Excel looks to group these, it's going to look for also now text box, just as it would pictures, like this picture that I've added that we covered last time, like label picture. It's going to cover those as well. So we have to get Excel to recognize that this text box is part of the label. So we can do that with the name. So I'm going to ask Excel inside VBA any specific shape that includes the name of TXT box, and it could be any number. I want to make sure to include that and group that with errors. So that's pretty much all we have to do in VBA. So I'm going to walk you through that code. It's really simple. I'll delete these particulars so we don't need to see those. And let's move into the VBA and show you how we added this particular thing. Into the developers we go, and Visual Basic. And if we look, we've got down additional macro here in our label design macros. If we scroll down a little bit, we see we have add text box. That's a brand new one, and all I'm going to be doing essentially is copying the existing text box that I have. There's a sample, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that sample, rename it. So let me show you that sample. It's over here. If we slide over here to the left, we see we've got this box template. We used this as a template before, and it's a simple text box called sample text box. So all I'm going to do is make a copy of that. I'm going to bring it right up here around H83. And then the user can then take it, change the font, they can change the text, they can change the background, the color, or do whatever they want with it once it appears. And as long as and then we're going to assign a name, a very unique name, and that's the important thing. It's the naming of that text box, so that in VBA, when we look over all the shapes, those shapes with that specific name are going to get included. So we can do that with the following lines of code. All right, so text box number as long. We need to keep track of the text box number. In fact, I want to increment that text box number accordingly so that each one is different. So we have to track that somewhere. Where are we tracking that? I'm going to track that right here in B82. So as we go up, the number goes up. And of course, when we have a brand new design, this is going to go back to 1. So new designs will go back to 1, and we'll just increment that number accordingly. And that's, of course, in B82. All right, so back into our code. So the text box number, of course, is B82. That's going to assign it a number. And then with the shapes, sample text box, that's the one I just showed you, that one on the left. We're going to take a copy of that, and then I'm going to select H83, and then do events, and then application wait. This helps remove any errors associated with when we paste it. Sometimes if it pastes too fast or it doesn't get it the first time, we want to make sure that the paste works well. Sometimes this can avoid some errors that I've found. So we're going to paste that right where the selection is in the H83. And then with that selection, we're going to give it a name. Remember, I want to give it a very specific and very unique name. Text box, it's always going to start out with TXT box. And then I specifically left out the E there because I wanted it very unique. So TXT box is something, a very specific name. And then I want to assign it the text box number. This number is going to be unique each and every text box that gets added. Then all we need to do is just set it up there with, now we can refer to it with the name that we've just assigned, with shapes text box and text box number. The text frame characters text, we're going to give it a text characters of text box just to give it a basics. The user is going to change that text, of course. And then I want to increment it left a little bit off, not right, on the corner of H83. I want to move it to the right a little bit so we can increment left 10, and then I want to move it down a little bit so we can increment top 20. That's going to move it down. I also want to make sure it's visible. This ensures that it's visible in case it's not, but it should be already. Next up, all we need to do with this macro is increment for the next shape, the next text box that the user entered. I want to make sure that this has a unique number, so we need to increment the text box number by 1 by doing this. B82 equals dot range B82, the current value, plus 1. That's going to increment the text box number by 1. That's it. That's all we need to do. And then what I have added in when we design those labels, when we group the labels, let's take a look at the loop. So now we've added a little bit of a feature. This was the group shapes. Remember, we have to group all of the shapes, all the data, all the labels, all the pictures, and now all the text boxes. So what I want to do is I want to loop through all of the shapes in the sheet, all of them. And then those that include certain types of names, certain names that meet certain criteria, we want to group them. So for example, if it exists the word data, we want to include it. If it exists the word label, we want to include it. If it includes the word label pick, we want to include it. And now our item picture, we want to include it. Or text box, we want it. Now I've added this text box, so if it includes TXT box, we also want to include it. So you can really see the pattern here of how we grouping shapes based on if their name includes a certain specific text that no other shape on the sheet exists. So make sure that every other shape, if you want to customize this, doesn't include these, because these are very specific to the label that we're designing. And then the rest is the same, and then we just group it. So that's all we had to do to include the text box. And of course, I've assigned that macro, and the macro, of course, is add text box. I've assigned it to that shape right here. So if we right click any individual shape inside the group of shapes and we click assign macro, we will see that it's add text box. That's the macro that's been assigned to that specific shape. All right, so that's it. So the next step is how do we get these label templates to save? So if we click update template, it's going to now update the template, and it's going to store that template on a specific sheet. It's going to go through a few different macros, and now it's been saved. And if we see, we now have the saved template here in our saved templates. We just have really one. I had one small test, but we don't need that. But basically, we just have one at this point. It's going to save a picture, and it doesn't matter if they're going to be all grouped or together. The templates, they're specifically named so that they can be copied back. So what we did is we took all the information from this template along with the picture, give it a specific name called template 1, included the details, and we have actually more details than that. We also have imported the details database. This is a database that takes care of all the column headers, the first row of data. We have that twice. We have to know any filter data. I want to keep the filter data, the format type, the data row, label text, the data. Also, if it's going to show label, remember, show the label or show the data, we need that all information has, so that when we load that data, it's going to all come back. So if I were to double click this and reload that label, it's all going to come back, but it still may not be perfect because there's a lot of different features that need to be saved here. And or you can also make changes, of course, and then click update the template. So there's a lot to show you. I want to show you how we save that template, and basically all we need to do is we have an update template button or we have a save template button. Both of those have the same macro. So if we right click that and we go into assign a macro, we see that we have the save template save update. That's the macro we're going to focus on, so I can show you just how we did that. All right, back into the VBA, we have a brand new module called template macros right here, template macros. And the first macro is called save update. Now we're going to use this macro for both save and for both updating. And all we need to do to check is just a few different things. So if we slide back over here to the right, and let's go on the design page so we can see a little more of the groups. We have a few different items. We now have the template ID. We want to know the template row, and we have a template ID. Every single template now has a unique ID. So when we look here into the save templates, we see that there's a template ID. Also, when we look for the template IDs, the template details, we see that we also have an ID. That's very important. Each template should have a unique ID. So when we have more IDs, they're all going to be saved down here. So keep in mind, and we also want to track the next template ID. So if I look in here in templates and I go into a brand new named range, I have two named range. So into the formulas, name manager, and we're going to scroll down here under template, and we see template name and template ID. Let's just look. Those are two dynamic ranges using offset. We can see that template ID here is an offset. We've been over this offset a few times, but basically it's going to track, it's going to grow as our template IDs grow, it's going to grow. And then of course we have template names, also based on the ID, but this one is going to be template names. I want to track both of those in dynamic named ranges. Those are the two really important fields on this. So we're going to use those in formulas to pull it. So I need to know, and remember, if we look at this, the first one starts on row 4. That's important. So if I want to find the first record, in this case it's 1, what row is it? I always need to know the row so I can load the details. In this case, the first one is located on row 4, and that's important because when we go into our label creator and we have the template ID of 1, if I have VBA put in the 1 right here in B7, it's going to put in that template ID, but I need to pull the row number from that. Based on that 1, based on that template, what is the row number? Well, we can use this match formula. Match B7, remember that is the template ID. We're looking in the named range template ID. That's in the dynamic named range I just went over for you. And then we want an exact match. And we're adding 3. We're adding 3 on this because we want to find the first row. I don't want to find the first record. If without that, it's going to return 1, but I actually want the row. And remember, our first one starts in row 4, so we must add 3. So I want to determine the row based on the ID, but I also want to determine the row based on the name. We have the name. I want to do both of those. There are times when I need to look up each one of those, one based on the ID and another one based on the row. They're going to be the same, of course, but there are different reasons for that. Okay, so it's important. We'll go over that. So the template row based on the name here, again, it's almost the same, but in this case, we're matching template names based on what is in E2 based on, that's the one the user selects. So if the user makes a selection change here of a template, I'm going to look right in B9 for the row and make sure that they've selected a proper selection. Why do we do this? Well, this gives us the ability for users to type in a brand new template name here. So simply typing in a new name, and they can save a brand new template based on the new name that they change. So it gives us the flexibility to save brand new ones. So I wanted to make sure to show you that as well. And also I want to know when the template is loading. So for example, if I select here, which I just did, it's going to load all of the details. It's going to load the label and the data filters and the design details. So I'm going to turn this to false. I want to turn this to true while it's doing that, and then back to false. This prevents other things from going on at the same time when it's loading. So I think that's pretty important, and I'll show you why in just a moment. Okay, so just the important thing, we have a row based on our name here. We also have a row based on our ID here. Both of those will return the same values, but in different areas they're important for different reasons. All right, so let's get into it right now, into the VBA when a user makes a change to E2, that is the label name. So we go into Label Creator and we scroll down a little bit. We have some new code here. On change of template, add in ID if found. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to look up that row. All right, so when they change the template, we need to do a few things. We want to make sure that B9 does not equal empty. What is in B9? Let's just review that real quick. That is, of course, the calculated row. B9 is the calculated row based on the name. We want to make sure if it's an error, it's going to return empty. So we want to make sure that it is not empty. So we can do that. Range B7 value equals sheet 6, and sheet 6 is our imported details. We're going to put in that ID. I'm going to put a note here, add in template ID. I want to put that template ID because it's been found, right? We know that B9 is not empty, so we have a row. We know the row. So B7 is where our template ID is going to go. We're going to take it from sheet 6, column A, and then B9 value. Let's just review what that exactly is. Sheet 6, which is our C template, column A here. The row number, we know the row is 4, and we know it's in column A. I want to take this ID right where it's found and place it right in here in B7. So that's all we're doing with that line of code. Okay, so next up, then we're ready to load the template. I'm going to go over that macro very shortly. I'm going to load the template, run the macro that takes all the details and loads them in. And essentially what is it doing? It's taking all the details from this first row, and including the label name, the data file, the data sheet, the first row, and all the data details. It's also going to take care of the import details. It's also going to load in all the data information, the first row of data from that. So it's going to load all of that into the label creator based on this. And of course, we're going to run an advanced filter because I only want to go template IDs number 1. If there's more, we want to put them in here. So we're going to use an advanced filter with criteria, and it's going to return our results are only 1. In this case, we only have 1. I didn't have time to create a lot of labels on this because I've been working so hard. I want to get you this training. So we're going to bring all of this data back into it based on the results because we only want to focus on template ID number 1 and bring those back into, that's the load template, and we'll go over that just a bit. So the question is that I want to ask you is, if it's not found, what's going to happen? Well, if it's not found, it's going to be a new template, right? So I want to make sure that this button changes to save template, save template. So if it's not found and they type something in, I want to make sure that this button changes to save as template. Notice it just changed from update template to save template. So that's very important. But when they select something else like test 2, then I want to load the template, basically load the template, and then it changes back to update template because it's now an existing template. So we have to recognize whether it's an existing or new one and then change the buttons accordingly. So that means else means it's not found, right? B9 is empty, meaning it's not found. Then I want to make the save template button, that's the button, they look the same, but they're just different shapes, equals true, and the update button equals false. So we're going to show or hide, save or update based on whether it's an existing or new one. What this does is allows us to use the same field for both new. So this is a drop-down list data validation, but in this data validation, we allow the users to use any type of value in there. So notice there's no error alert on this one. The settings are the template names, but there's no error alert. What this is going to do is allow users to use the same field for selecting existing templates or adding new ones. It's a multi-purpose field, so that can be really powerful in your applications. Okay, so let's look into it, back into the code. So we understand how this is. It's very simple, but now I want to go into the template load and see just how we temp load it. But before that, I want to focus on the template save and update. And remember, when we are loading and saving templates, we're going to use the same macro between saving and update. So even though we have two buttons, remember, we have a save button, we have an update button. Both of those are assigned to this macro. It's more for user purpose to save as new or update, same macro. But all we need to do is focus on just a few things. We're going to do the template row as long. It needs to know what row the template is on. And of course, the template column. We're using data mapping here. I've gone over that a few times. We'll go over it briefly. Basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to go into the save template. And if you notice these cells up here, these cells are related to the same cells here where the data is located in the label design area and they're right here. So these are the same cells. So the label detail, of course, is E8, while the labels per sheet is E9. So those are all based on this. And of course, this information is going to always come from the label selected. So when we load the label, this information is going to come. So we don't need to save this information, but of course, the filter in the data, this information is important, such as F22, F23. So this information does get saved in the save template because that's based on the data. So we want all to make sure that F22 and F23. So all those values are going to come from here. So that's why we use data mapping here. So the top position, left position, those are unique. So those are based on the label here, the position of the label. We need to know where the position is. And that's the position, of course, according to H83, the position, how far away it is. If we move it down lower, it's going to be, so it's based on the position, the top position here. So we can always put that label back in the exact part that we had it before. All right, so we understand data mapping just a little bit because I went over that quickly. So we need to basically loop through all the columns when we're saving it, and I want to take whatever is in, for example, here in F22 and put it in the right spot in our template, in this database right here. All right, so let's continue on with the code. Back into the code, so we have the template ID, the last data row. I need to know the last data row. If we're adding brand new data, we need to know the last data row. Also, we need to loop through all the data row. The data row is long, the detail row as long, and the detail row we're calling this. Okay. So we have the detail rows here, we have the save templates are here, and of course we have the label, the data row. Remember, we're going to loop through these data. We need to know how much. I need to know that the last data row is in this case on D35 because we need to loop through all the data to make sure that that gets saved inside the detail. Starts at 27, goes all the way to 35. I need to make sure that gets saved as well. Okay. Back into our code, let's take a look. We're going to dimension the label shape as a shape. I need to bring that over into the template with sheet 1. If range 2 value, E2 value equals empty, remember we need the template name. If it's empty, we can't save the template without a name. Please make sure the label template has a name. E2 select, we're going to guide the user where to put in that name right in E2 and exit the sub. We can't save a template without a name, so this ensures that the user does give a name for the template. If B6 value equals empty, it's a new template. B6, let's refresh your memory on that. B6, of course, is right in here. That is going to be the row based on the template ID. So if that's empty, we know it's a new one. We know it's a brand new label, so we need to differentiate between new and existing. So we can use B6 to tell us whether it is. Okay, back into the code. If B6, then it's a new template if it's empty. So what do we do for a new template? Well, the first thing I want to do is give it a template row, and we're going to use the first available in sheet 5. Sheet 5 is where our main template information is. We're going to use A99 and XLF. This is going to get us the last row with a value. This is going to get us the first row after that, the first available row. So we have that, and all we need to do then is add in a template ID. How do I get a unique ID for this brand new template? Well, we can use something called the next template ID here in B8. What is that? Well, that's going to be the maximum of all the template IDs. Remember, these have to be numerical. They have to all be numbers plus 1. So we're going to the maximum number that's been in of all of the template IDs plus 1. That's going to get us our unique number. In this case, we only have 1, so the next number is 2. So we can now take this 2 for our new template and put it right here in A5. A5 would be the first available cell. Next up, we can then run a loop that goes all the way through from here to here for the next line, so we can take all that information and pull it from E2 and put it here, pull it from E8 and put it here. So that's what we're going to do inside our code. All right, so we could do that. So sheet 5, these two things are if it's new, else it's an existing. Else we know our template row is in B6, so that's all we need to do. So whether it's new or whether it's existing, we're getting the template row. The only difference is in a new one, we're adding in the template ID into A and the template row, and we're getting it from B8. That's the one with the max formula. So everything else after this end if is all the same, regardless if it's a new or an existing template. The template ID now is located in sheet 5, regardless if it's new or existing. It's going to be located in sheet 5, range A in the template row. So we can assign a template ID. Next up, we're going to run that loop I just spoke with. Column 1 would be the template ID, but we've already taken care of that. So we can start our loop in column 2 and go from columns 2 to 9. So sheet 5 cells, template row, template column value. What is the value that we're going to be placing in the database? We know the column, we know the row. We're looping through the columns from 2 to 9. The row is constant. We know the row there. What is it going to equal? It's going to equal range. What is the range? Well, that range is found in row 1 of the template column. So this range here, whatever cell, E23, F23, whatever it is, it's going to go right here. And we're going to add in the label data just with this one line of code. And as it loops through, it's going to add each one from 2 to 9. Next up, we're ready to add in the design information or delete existing, if any. The first thing we want to do is the template ID. If I'm saving a template ID here, I want to make sure that in case the user's made any changes or it's existing, regardless, I want to make sure that template 1 here gets deleted because I'm going to bring in a brand new one. The user may have made changes. I'm going to bring in a brand new one and place it here. So we need to delete it. But if it doesn't exist, it could cause an error. And therefore, we've wrapped it in on error, resume next. Right here, on error, resume next, sheet 5 template, the word template, and the template ID delete. We want to delete it because I'm going to bring in a brand new one and place it and replace it. So that takes care of it. Next up, I want to make sure that all the shapes are grouped. And why do we have to do that? Well, if we're on design labels, they're not grouped, so they individually can work with them. However, if the user is on any other step here, they're always grouped together to keep them together. So keep that in mind in the code. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that they are all grouped together so that I can copy and paste them over. Because once they get copied over, I want to make sure that they're copied and pasted in a single group. Okay, so that's important. They all have to be grouped together so we can ensure that they're grouped with some lines of code here. On error, resume next, right? It set the label shape to equal templates group. If there's an error, if they're not grouped, this label shape is going to be nothing. So we can check if the label shape is nothing, that means they're not grouped. Then we can run the macro, which we've been over last week, to group the template shapes. We can group them using this code. And then on error, resume next. Just because let's say there is no shapes at all in case they're trying to create a template, this will catch that. Set the label shape to group again, just one more time. And now if the label shapes is still nothing, maybe they don't have any shapes at all, then we can just ask the user to design, then please design your label and exit sub. Just in case, this is a catch, in case they haven't created any shapes at all for their label, we want to make sure that they do that. We don't want them to save a template without actually creating some shapes or creating some labels. Next up, what I want to do is I want to set the position of this. I want to make sure that when I bring this back over into the label creator, into design, I want to make sure it's exactly positioned from H83, whatever its current position. So when I save it, I need to know the position from this cell, H83. How far down is it and how far to the right is it? So we can do that with just a few lines of code. Sheet 5, J and the template, and K. J is going to save our top location. K is going to save our left location, or in this case, the right from the cells. So what does that look like? That looks like something like this. So we'll get something, the top position is 5.9422 and the left position is something like 11. So I want to bring those in so that I can then quickly and easily reposition the label exactly where it was before. I'll make sure of that because the positioning is very important. So we can do that with just the lines of code here. So the J in the template row equals shapes top, its current top position, its current minus the top position of H83. And same thing with the left, the current left position minus the left position of H83. That's going to get us the difference between the left position of H83 and the top position of H83. Because when I run the macro that brings them back in, I'm going to use these positions to reposition it. Okay, so what's next? Next up, I'm ready to copy the label shape. Now that we've defined the label shape, we can copy it from our design and bring it into sheet 5. So sheet 5, we're going to activate that. Then we're going to select L in the template row. I want to place it right in L, and that's okay. They're going to kind of place on top of each other. Nobody will see the labels there, so it doesn't matter if they're a little bit on top of each other. You can increase the width of the rows so that if you want to. And then we're going to paste that into it. We're going to paste it just as it is. Then I want to make sure to assign it a unique name. It's very important because I want to know a name based on the template ID. So we're going to assign the selection name template plus the template ID. This gives it a brand new unique name, and that also allows us to make sure that we can delete it if we need to delete it when we save it again, because we know the name. It's always based on the template ID. Then up, I want to make sure it's displayed just in case. So template and template ID visible. Yeah, must so true. It should be, but I just wanted to make sure it is. Next up, we're ready to add in the template data and the design details. Again, what is all of that? The template data and the design? Well, that's all of the filter data. If you have any filters that we've done, we want to make sure to add in all of the filter data, all of the formats and stuff. That's got to come. We also want to make sure that we add in all of the design areas. So we want to make sure to know what labels to show, what data to show. That's all got to go in there as well. So we need to make sure that that gets all saved, and it gets saved all in this import details, and that's sheet 6. So we want to make sure to put that in, so we can do that with the following lines of code. The last data row is the application worksheet count A. Why are we using count A to get the last row in this case? Because these rows are hidden. We can't use end XLF when we have hidden rows. Keep that in mind. Can't use it, but we can use count A. We can count the text between D27 and D77 plus 26 to get us our last row. Why is that? Let me show you what that might look like. So here in our design, I need to get the last row. In this case, the last row is 35, but these rows are all hidden. So we can't use end XLF. It's going to return an incorrect value when these are hidden, and they're often hidden. So what I can do is use count A. So I can count all of the text in here, in this case 9, and then I want to add 26 to it. So when I add 26 to 9, it's going to get us 35. 35 is the last row that I want, so we can use that, and we'll do that just in the code using count A. So the application worksheet function count A, D27, we're going to count all the text between D27, D77, and then we're going to add 26 onto it because that's the starting position. That's going to find the last data row for imported columns. Cannot use XLOOKUP on hidden rows. Last data row. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's going to get us. Then we have the first available detail row. I want to know what's the first available row. And our first detail, in this case, it's 12, but I need to know the first. In case it's not already here, I want to add it down here. In this case, 12. So I need to know A, XL99. We can use XLUP in this case because the rows aren't hidden, and so we need to know the first available row in case we need to add new details. So we can get that from right here. The first available detail row is sheet 6, A99, and XLUP plus 1. That's going to get us the first available row. Next up, we can start a loop. Now I'm ready to loop. I'm going to loop through all of this, starting at row 27, going to 35 in this case. And I want to take in all this information, but I also want to add in the design data. The design is always going to start on 83, so that's 56 difference, 56 rows difference. Our select data filter is going to start on 27. Our design is going to start on 83. The difference is 56, and it's going to always be the same number. Always going to be, so if the data is 9, the design is going to be 9. It's always going to be the same, so we can use that. That helps us. So because I want to put both of that, all of that information into the import details. So let's look at our next up. Add and import filter details for data row. Remember, running our loop to last data row. If K in the data row does not equal empty, why is that important? K is going to keep track of our row. I need to know what row to put it in. Let's look in the data here, and we'll look at column K. Column K is I've added this row. What is 3, 4, 5, 6? This is the row of our import details. 3, 4, 5, 6. Why is that? Because if it's an update, I want to make sure I change any values here because they're updating it. But if it's a new one, I need to know that. So how do I know if it's a new or an update? I can use this. If this is blank, if K is blank, it's new, because for every time we create a new label, this is cleared out. So this, of course, will be hidden. You can change the font color to the same as the background, and these will be hidden. So this is going to be our guide to know if it's used, if it's been added to the details database or not. These are the row numbers. So we can use K to do that. So that's just what we do inside the code. If K in the data row does not equal blank, that means it's existing. The detail row then becomes whatever is in K. So we can put it back in. Otherwise, the detail row is going to be the first available row. If it's the first available row, we then just need to update the first available detail row, adding in one increment one, so that the next available row is going to be one down. Now that we've determined the row, everything else is the same. Regardless of if it's a new item or an existing item, it's going to be the same. So we can just use, we didn't use data mapping here, so you can see it's some bit of rows. A in the detail row is going to be the template ID. It's always going to be the template ID. B, of course, we're going to put in, what are we putting in? We're going to put in all of the details. B through C equals, what does it equal? It equals the copy over the column header and first row of data. So basically all I'm doing is copying over. Now the reason I'm not copying over all of this is because this is a merged cell. So that's going to create issues, E and F. So I'm going to copy over the first two, then I'm going to copy over the next three in 2 lines of code. First two, the next three. So D, E, and then G through, and then G through J. So we'll do that within the next three, G through I. So actually G through I, because that's a merge cell as well. And we can do that in these lines of code here. So the first one is B through C equals D through E, those first two columns. And the next one would be D through F is going to equal G through I. And that's just all we're going to be doing is taking the data here and bringing it over into the import details. So you see employee name, Paul Norris, and then we're going to bring in any filtered data formats here as well in D through E. So that's all we're doing. Again, first two columns, the next three. So we're going to go through that loop. And then next up, I also want to bring in, I want to put in the data row. What row is it? So I can bring it back into the right row. Notice the data rows 27, 28. These are the same data rows that are here. 27, 28. So we know what row to place it when we bring it back in. So we also want to store that row there. Okay, so once we have that, we want to put in the data row in column G. Right. Next up, I want to put H through K. Next up, we're going to be putting in the design details. Design details go from D. Remember, it's D, plus 56 because our design row starts at 83. Our data row starts on 27. So we need to add 56. So D and the data row plus 56 through G and the data row plus 56 is going to add in all the design details. And what does that do? And basically what we're doing in this case is we're taking all of whatever design rows here, whatever is in 27 plus 56, taking this information, all of here, D through G, copying all that and bringing it right into our design details right here and bring it right here all the way here. Then I'm going to add the design row here. And then, of course, we want to know the row, the current row, which is just a formula row. And when we bring this back in, it's going to help us. That way, when we run our advanced filter, we always know the original row of data. So that's important. Okay, moving on. Back into the code we go. Let's see. So now that we want to set the design row. We also want to know the design row. Of course, that's going to be in column L. And then the row that I just found you, that's the actual row of the database. We're just going to put in that formula that's going to keep track of the row. All right, next up, K and the data equals the value. Remember, I want to put back in K and the data row, the detail row. We're putting that in K. That's got to stay in K. So because we have to know what row back in the database. So K here must be put in. We need to put that row right in K or also in the design as well. So we have to put that as well in the design. It's also here. So if we look in the design row and we drop down to K, drop it down here, K, we see that this is 3 also. So I want them stored there, 3, 4, 5. You can see it's hidden under the label, but it is there. Okay, so let's continue all of our code so we know how to continue to save it. So next up, we want to check if step 3 is open. Next up, what I want to do is basically, I've grouped this shape to bring it over. So if we're in step 3, I need to make sure it's ungrouped because we have to work with it if it's ungrouped. But if we're in another step for anywhere from 1, 2, maybe even 4, we want to make sure that all these items are ungrouped. So we can do that with the following lines of code. If range 78 to 132, if the entire row is hidden, if that we know is our step. If we know, then we can ungroup. This is step 3, 78 to 132. How do we know that? If these rows are visible, 78, all the way down to 130. If those are visible, we know step 3 is currently active. We can use that to test it out. So if 78 to 132, the entire rows are hidden or false, then we know we should ungroup it. Otherwise, we should group the label shapes. Group template shapes. So we're just going to run those 2 macros based on whatever tab the user's on. Next up, we want to make sure just to update. Now that we've saved it, we want to make sure that the update template is visible and that the save as template button is hidden. So we can do that with this. And then we're going to activate sheet 1. That is it. That's all we have to do to save or update templates. Brings in all the data, but how do we load them back in? When we load them back in, remember we went over this code. Remember we went over this macro. When we change E2, this is the macro that runs. So let's go over this macro. Dim the template. Again, we're going to dimension the same, pretty much the same template rows, the template column. We need to loop through that, but this time it's going to be the reverse using our data mapping. So we have a lot of dimensions. Again, we want to make sure B6, if B6 is empty, why would that? Then there's no row. Please select a correct saved label from the template. B6 must contain a template row. Otherwise, we cannot load any template without an actual row. So we need to check that. That's the first check. Next up, create. I want to make sure that they're on label step 3 when we are loading it, because that's going to load it in properly. So we want to load that in. All right, next up, I want to stop the calculations. What that's going to do is formulas are going to be set to manual and screen updating. So that's going to be located right here in the code reset, stop calculations. You see that, and reset. So anytime we stop it, we must reset also. I want to make this application faster too. So it's going to be a lot faster, hopefully, as I work with it. So back into the template macro, B10 equals true. I want to set the template load to true. That's very important. And we want to set the template row. We know it's in B6 template row. We need to load the information, so we have to load. We know what row, and we also have to know the column. The column we're going to loop. In this case, we're looping through, starting at column 1, which is the ID. We're going to load all the details other than the template name. We don't need to load the template name. Why do we need to load the template name? Because the template name is already there in E2. We already have the template name because that's just what the user selected. So we don't want to make sure that if it's column 2, save templates, notice our template name in column 2, we want to skip column 2. So we're going to go from 1 to 9 here, skipping column 2 because column template name is already open. This would create a loop that would keep loading and loading and loading. So we don't need to put in the template name. That's already been selected by the user. Okay, if the template column does not equal 2, then do what? Then range, that's with sheet 1, what cell? The cell is located right here in the first row on sheet 5. That's our data mapping. That's the cell that we're going to be putting in the value. But what value are we going to be putting in? We're going to be putting in whatever is in sheet 5, template row, the template column value. We're going to be taking all that data and bringing it back in, just in case you're going to taking this data, this data, this data, and we're going to be putting in this cell, this data, and putting it in F22, this last row and putting it. So we're going to take all that data from 1 to 9. And then, of course, I'm going to take this information, I'm going to reposition, copy, bring this label over, bring it back into sheet 3. I'm going to copy it over, I'm going to position it, and then I'm going to ungroup it. So that's just what we're going to do inside the code. All right, so next up, we want to assign a template ID. Once we've finished our loop here, we can then assign a template ID. We know that's going to be now in B7 because we just placed it there. And then we're going to add in all the label data and the design details. We need to run an advanced filter. So what do I want to do? I want to take the template ID. Actually, it's already been placed through a formula. So I'll show you that. The formula is going to be right here. So import details. This template ID, notice this is a formula. We don't need to place in the criteria. It's going to be label creator B7. Of course, that's going to be right here in B7. So that is our template ID right here in B7. So we can link it to there, and now we can run our criteria. So what I want to do is run an advanced filter of all the templates. There'll be a lot more, and I only want to return, in this case, template 1. So whatever's here, I want to return that. So our results, then we can take all this detail and bring it back into our label creator. So we do that with an advanced filter. So let's take a look at the advanced filter. Sheet 6, A2, those are all of our details. M, that's the last column. Make sure, I might need to update that. M is correct. M is our last column. And bring it using the criteria. Criteria would be R2 through R3. And then our results would be in T2 through AF2. So that's just what we did inside the advanced filter. The last advanced filter, we're going to copy that data over. The criteria range is R2 through R3. That is the template ID. Then we're going to copy that to range T2 through AF2, and unique is false. We're going to bring that over. Then I want to make sure that we get our last results row. What is our last results row? Our last results row in this case are 11, but I want to make sure that it's not less than 3. If it is, we can exit out. There are no details, just in case. So we can do that with the following lines of code. The last detail results row equals she6 T99, and this is going to get us our last row. If the last detail results row are less than 3, then go to no details. For the detail row equals 3 to the last detail, we're going to now loop through all of the detail rows, bringing in all of the data, back into those. So here we need to know the data row is going to be in Z. We need to know what row. This is why we keep the data row. Remember, the data row 27, 28, the design row 83 through 91. So we're going to take this row 27, I'm going to place this information here. I'm going to take this row and I'm going to place this information here. So that's going to bring all of the data back into both this information here, bring it back in here. We know what row, 27 through 35. And it's going to also bring all of this information and bring it back into here. All that. So that's all we're doing with that, with those lines of code, just bringing all that information right back in. So we do all that here. All right, and we're going to update K. We want to make sure K gets updated with the actual detailed database row. Once we load it in, we want to make sure to load those rows into. All right, and next up, we're going to group any label. This no details comes in case there's no details, no detail row. So we'd skip to here. We're going to skip all of this if there's no data. So next up, we want to group the template. I want to group any label shape. Why are we grouping it? Because I need to position it accordingly. So it's important that it's grouped. So I'm going to run the macro to group it. And if there's an error, next up, I want to delete any existing labels before bringing previously saved groups. So I want to delete any labels on sheet 1 just in case. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the labels. So sheet 5 template, and the template, remember this is the template that's located in our template ID. That is the template that's located right here. I want to take this, we know the name template and we know the ID, so we know the name of this shape, template 1, and we're going to bring it right back into the label creator. Bring it back in here and then position it accordingly using our top and left positions. So we can do that. We can copy it from our label template sheet, activate sheet 1, select H83 and paste it right into there. Then I'm going to assign it the name. Remember, the name that we always use, we must reassign it the name because we have different names. We're going to assign it the name of shapes template loop group. And so here we're going to assign the name. Then with it, I can position it. Remember, the top position is now based the top position of H83 plus whatever's been stored in J. And of course, the left position is also whatever's stored in column K. That's going to reposition our group exactly where we left it the last time. Next up, I want to check if sheet step 1 is open. Then we can do this. If 5 through 27 is hidden, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this label sheet picture is visible just in case the step 1 is open. I want to make sure that label, remember that small icon of the label, I want to make sure that's visible. If not, I want to hide it. That's the small icon for the label, just in case depends on what step is open. We may need to show this icon here, I want to show that or picture. Show that if we're on step 1. So that does that as well. All right, so next up, if step 3 is open, we want to ungroup the shapes. Step 3, we can use that. We want to, because the step 3 is the design stage, we want to make sure they're ungrouped. But if it's any other step, we want to make sure that we group them. That's just going to make sure they're grouped or ungrouped. Next up, we can set the template load to false. That's important. And also the shapes, we want to make sure that the update template, we just loaded a template, so we want to make sure the update template is visible and the save template is now hidden. Active, we don't want to scroll all the way up just in case we're scrolled, and then reset the calculations. That's also very important. So that is the two main macros that run this application. Now we know how we can save templates. We can take this data and bring it into the save template details and into the details, and we can run an advanced filter and bring it right back into the design. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me this week. I hope you liked the label creator. If you have any ideas, you want me to add something, I'm going to make this application. Of course, it's free for download, but if you want a secure and completed application with all the bugs, and it's going to be a lot faster, I'll make sure to include that on my website in a few weeks' time. All right. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.